Have you ever wondered why so many people say life changes dramatically somewhere between the ages of 65 and 70? There is a quiet uncertainty many people carry into this stage, one they rarely say out loud. The fear that the freedom they worked their whole life for might not feel like freedom at all once it finally arrives. I want to walk you through something honest today, because understanding what's actually happening in this stage tends to replace fear with something much steadier. Stay with me until the end, because the fourth truth is often the hardest one, and the one that changes the most once you finally understand it. This isn't because something terrible happens all at once. It's because several small shifts happen quietly, around the same time, and almost nobody prepares us for them. Today, we're going to count down through 4 honest truths about this stage of life, starting with the easiest to face and building all the way to the one that tends to affect people the most deeply. Let's begin. Truth 4. Choosing whether to grow older or keep growing. Let's start with the truth that's easiest to face, because it comes down entirely to a choice, not to anything happening to you. Some people reach this stage and quietly decide life is essentially finished. They stop learning. They stop trying new things. They start telling themselves, "I'm too old for that." 5 words that can quietly become one of the biggest barriers to happiness a person ever builds. Consider a woman we'll call Evelyn, 66, a grandmother who had never once picked up a paintbrush in her life. After retiring, she signed up for a community art class out of pure curiosity. She was nervous the first week, certain everyone else would be younger and more talented. She kept showing up anyway. A year later, her grandchildren hung one of her paintings in their living room. Evelyn says now, "Retirement didn't end my life. It introduced me to a part of myself I never had time to meet." That's the real difference between growing older and continuing to grow. It rarely requires anything dramatic. Reading a new book, learning a skill, joining a walking group. Every small step sends your mind the same quiet message. My life still has purpose. Truth 3. Time stops feeling unlimited. Here's a truth that arrives a little quieter and settles a little deeper. There's a moment in this stage that almost nobody expects in advance. It doesn't come with a birthday. It usually arrives on an ordinary day. A funeral for an old friend, a doctor recommending another test, noticing that a simple cold takes a week longer to shake than it used to. In that moment, something quietly shifts. Time stops being something you assume you have and becomes something you actually notice. Consider a man named Thomas, 70, a retired postal worker. For years, he told himself he'd travel once things slowed down. He kept postponing it. Then retirement arrived, but so did a few health complications that made long trips harder than expected. One evening, he told his son something the son never forgot. "I spent so many years preparing to live that I forgot to actually live." That awareness can either fill someone with regret or sharpen how they spend what's left. The people who seem most at peace stop wasting energy on things that no longer matter. Instead of asking, "How many years do I have left?" they start asking, "How do I make today count?" That one shift changes almost everything. Truth 2. Your circle quietly gets smaller. Now we arrive at a truth that catches many people by surprise, because it doesn't happen in the body at all. It happens in the people around you. It rarely happens all at once. A friend moves closer to their own children. A longtime neighbor sells the house next door. Coworkers get busy with their own retirements. Grandchildren grow into their own full lives. The phone rings less. The Friday coffee that used to be automatic quietly stops happening. Let me tell you about a woman named Doris, 69, widowed a few years earlier. After retiring, she expected more time with friends. Instead, entire weeks passed with barely a real conversation. One afternoon, she admitted something out loud she'd never said before. "I know people still care about me. I just haven't felt this lonely in my whole life. That sentence carries something many people quietly understand. Loneliness isn't only about being physically alone. It begins when we stop feeling needed. But the people who feel most at peace here aren't the ones with the biggest circle. They're the ones who nurture a few real connections on purpose. They make the call instead of waiting for one. Before we get to the hardest truth of all, I'd love to know, who is one person you've been meaning to call? Tell me in the comments. And if this is speaking to you so far, take a moment to like this video and subscribe so more of these conversations find their way to you. Truth 1. You lose an identity you spent decades building. And now, the truth beneath all the others. The one that, for a great many people, is the hardest of all. For a great many people, the hardest part of this stage has nothing to do with gray hair or aching knees. The hardest part is invisible. It's waking up one morning and realizing that the role you carried for decades has quietly disappeared. For 40 or 50 years, your days had a rhythm. People depended on you. Your schedule gave your day meaning, and without meaning to, your work became part of who you were. Then, almost overnight, it stops. The alarm no longer rings. The phone goes quiet. Even a simple question like, "What are you doing tomorrow?" becomes strangely hard to answer. Consider a man we'll call Walter, 68, who spent over 3 decades as a foreman on construction sites. People came to him constantly for his experience. After retiring, the calls simply stopped. One evening, he quietly told his wife, "I'm still here, I just don't feel like I matter the way I used to." His health hadn't changed. His family still loved him fully. But somewhere along the way, he had confused his job with his identity, an easy thing for almost anyone to do. The same thing happens to a mother whose children have grown and moved out, standing in a suddenly quiet house, wondering who she is now that she isn't needed every day. Here's the truth worth holding on to. Your value was never actually tied to your job title. Purpose doesn't disappear at this stage, it simply changes shape. The people who find real peace here are usually the ones who stop asking, "What did I used to do?" and start asking, "Who can I become now?" 4 truths. Choosing to keep growing instead of simply growing older. Learning that time is no longer unlimited. Watching your circle quietly shrink and choosing to nurture what remains. And underneath all of it, the hardest one, losing an identity you spent decades building and slowly discovering that your worth was never actually tied to it. None of these are simple to face, but understanding them one by one tends to replace fear with something steadier, the sense that you're not failing at this stage. You're simply meeting it the way everyone eventually does. If today's message found you, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe so these conversations keep finding their way to you. Before you go, ask yourself honestly, which of these 4 truths have you felt the most? Share it in the comments. Your answer might be exactly what another viewer needs to read today. The years between 65 and 70 are not the end of your value. For many people, they quietly become the beginning of their wisest ones.